everyone, this is Ron from High Tech Legion, and this is the EVGA Z77 for the Win motherboard. And of course, the Z77 chipset supports the latest Intel Ivy Bridge processors, and it is also backwards compatible with Sandy Bridge processors using the socket 1155. And of course, the Z77 for the Win motherboard is one of their higher end motherboard models. Have features in here such as USB 3 and SATA 3 6G, and of course PCIe 3.0 ready. Here at the back have some more features and a preview of what the motherboard layout looks like. And of course, as it says here on the top, it has 4-way SLI, and you can see 5 PCIe Express 16 slots in there. And this also appears to be slightly wider than the standard ATX form factor Z77 motherboard. And of course, let's just start opening the package. We can see what we can find inside. Inside is more good packaging. Flip it over so we can see the motherboard facing upwards. And first thing we see is, of course, the documentation. You can see the EVGA Z77 motherboard installation guide, and inside that is a driver CD with an EVGA case badge you can attach in your case. This installation guide is all English. See there's some illustrations to guide you in case you're a first-time user. Also, there is a fold-out manual. This is a user guide that is very easy. You don't need to open up the user's guide, which is thicker. This is actually just, you can just leave it open somewhere just as a reference, showing you the layout of the motherboard itself, and of course the accessories, and they're all packed in individual anti-static bags. You can see here, this is a firewire bracket connected to the motherboard header on end, and this is hard to see. You have to open this one up so you can find here. Appears to be 2 sets of cable. Is a SATA cable, pair of SATA cables, and this one is a 4-pin Molex to 2 SATA cable, SATA data cable, SATA power cable. And that aside, another bag here, another bracket with 4 USB 2.0 headers, and another bracket in here. Appears to be a USB 3.0 bracket this time. It's hard to see there. See, with the 19-pin blue connector. And more accessories. Here you have a slightly longer dual SLI connector. Here you have a triple SLI connector with the specific spacing for this particular motherboard. And the I/O shield for the rear. And we have finally the last one. It's a bit hard to see, so let's open it up. I open them with the SATA cable. And these are, of course, I believe these are more SATA cables, but this is for an E-SATA, and let's see here. This is an adapter, 4-pin Molex, and which is actually braided and sleeved to several SATA power cables. And these are latching cables. I'm sure if they're SATA or E-SATA, but see, they're latching SATA cables in here. Most likely for SATA 6. We'll have to consult the manual for that. And of course the motherboard itself. So I'm just going to reset the camera. We can take a closer look. As you can see here, This is similar to the packaging they had used for their video cards, but now they're using it for their motherboards. Alright, so here we have the EVGA Z77 for the win motherboard out of the packaging. And the first thing we notice is that it is slightly wider than the standard ATX form factor. Now, the standard ATX form factor is 12 inches tall by 9.6 inches wide. This is actually slightly wider. Not the box actually says EATX, but this is actually a little less than that. EATX is 12 by 12, meaning it will look like a square. But this one is actually measuring just under 10.5 inches in width, so 10.375 I believe the exact measurement is, and that will make it be able to fit in mid-tower cases. If you're concerned that if your case can fit a regular mid-tower, rather the standard ATX form factor, and you have a little bit of space on the right side for cable routing, the EVGA Z77 for the win motherboard can still fit. Of course, you'll probably have to sacrifice a little bit of that cable management on the right side, but that is not an issue for most people. And of course, let's start to look at each feature in detail. Let's start here at the top side near the CPU area. Of course, first see here the first 4-pin PWM fan header, and there's actually 7 of them in total. Let's just point them out. First one is right there. Second one is on the CPU area right here. This is directly for the CPU, of course. CPU fan, if you don't plug in a fan there, it will read as a CPU error when you boot. And the third one is right in the corner. And there's another one here that is connected to the PCH chipset underneath, and the PLX PEX chipset underneath as well. And of course, PWM is connected here. If you don't want to use the fan, of course, you just need to unplug that. And there's 2 more here at the bottom underneath, and one is actually right here for the rear fan. So that makes 7 in total. Now let's look at the features on the CPU area. You have 7 plus 1 PWM here for the CPU, and there's also the heatsink cooling them, and I will show photos of that later with the heatsink removed so you can see what it looks like. And the CPU here is the sockets look slightly different than other LG1155 sockets. They're using Lotus socket in here, and of course EVGA CPUs have more gold content in the brushes compared to other motherboard manufacturers for better contact. And let's close that. You don't want that brushes getting damaged. And also, you might have noticed the additional power in here. You only need to plug in the primary power directly above the CPU if you're not an extreme overclocker. Of course, for extra power, you can use the additional ATX power, right, the secondary one right on the left of the primary one. And I have to grab the motherboard here so you can see closely. This is an EVGA exclusive feature. This is the EVGA easy voltage readout point right at the top of the DIMM slot. And if you notice the DIMM slot design here, it only locks on the top side, doesn't lock here on the bottom, so it makes it very convenient if you have a video card installed here on the topmost PCIe X16 slot. Meaning you don't need to remove the video card if you need to remove or swap out your memory modules in here. And also these memory modules have a maximum of 32 GB in dual channel. You can see that they're alternating in position, and there's also a little bit of gap in the middle, and also a little bit of gap from the CPU heatsink area into the first DIMM slot, so that there's better air cooling. Rather airflow between the memory and cooling it when you're inside your case. And here on the right side, some of the features for tabletop benchmarkers, especially, you have your debug LED in here, which also doubles as the CPU temperature, as we have seen in previous EVGA motherboards. And also you have your reset, power, and clear CMOS button on the right side. Also, we've seen this, I believe, first on the P67 for the win motherboard from EVGA, and now they have it here on the Z77 for the win, and angled 24-pin power. And it's also very convenient for cable management, and it minimizes the amount of cables that are on top on your components and give you more room, especially if you are an extreme overclocker and you have your LN2 cooling on your memory. This limits the interaction with the cables in here, so there's a little bit more room for your equipment on top. And here, let's go a little bit to the right so you can see it. This is actually the PCIe slot enable and disable switch. You can see that there's 5 switches in on and off position. So you don't need to break your, for example, if you have multiple video cards in a water cooling loop, you don't need to break that loop in order to troubleshoot your which card is which PCIe card slot is working or not, and you can just switch these off, and for much more convenient overclocking and troubleshooting. And of course we have the SATA ports right at the bottom. The Intel Z77 chipset supports up to 4 SATA 3G and a pair of SATA 6G ports. So these two black ones at the bottom and the 2 red ones here at the bottom as well are all the Intel Z77 chipset powered SATA ports, while the extra pair of SATA 6G ports here is actually powered by the Marvell 9182 chip. If you look closely, right just underneath there, tucked inside, you can see a Marvell chip in there. It's powering these SATA 6G ports. Of course, we know that the Marvell 9182 is one of the better performing SATA 6G chip controls available. And also, another feature for overclockers that we'll find very useful, you have a triple BIOS switch in here. You can see 1, 2, and 3, and you also can switch between them using the toggle switch at the bottom. Of course, 1 is default, and the first BIOS is also replaceable. Especially, I mentioned, it comes in handy for overclockers because they can corrupt BIOSes easily, and you can switch out between one BIOS and another, and then just so you can boot and then switch back to reflash, no problem. So, and also this is another new feature. Let me just grab it closer here, because this one is not a switch, it is a jumper. It says there, it's labeled as dark mode jumper. Now, of course, there's plenty of LEDs all over here. You might not be able to see it, but especially here for the BIOS, as I mentioned, these actually light up whichever BIOS you're using. And there's also a lot of indicators here for the power and various points of the motherboard. And these will light up red, but if you want to have you want to disable those lights, you can just put the jumper in a different position, in the off position here, and all those lights will not be enabled, except of course with the debug LED that will remain on even if you have the dark mode jumper set to the off position. And here we have at the bottom, let's continue on, you have of course there's the PCH chipset in here, Intel PCH chipset, and the PLX PEX8747 chip underneath there. Now, I'll explain that later once we go over the PCI X16 slots distribution here, but we'll finish the features at the bottom first. Of course, this is the front panel port. It is slightly shorter than your normal front panel ports here, but they're color-coded and labeled, so it's easy to figure out which switch or which LED light to plug in there for your case, even without consulting your user's guide. And also, this is a 19-pin USB 3.0 header, and it is actually powered by an ASMedia 1042 controller. You will not find anywhere here. It's actually located right here underneath the PCIe X16 slot, the first one. And of course, the ASMedia 1042, also similar to the Marvell 9182 chip controller, is one of the better performing USB 3.0 controllers available. And of course, we're going to benchmark those later. I'll show you how better it performs. And you have, as mentioned already, a pair of 4-pin PWM fans. And this one, you don't see it often anymore, especially in high-end motherboards. You have a FireWire port here, a header, and you have a pair of USB 2.0 ports. Now, the FireWire actually included a bracket as well, so you can use it even if your case does not have a FireWire front panel port. You can use the included bracket with the EVGA Z77 for the win motherboard. And here at the bottom you have a built-in speaker. So that's why the front panel headers here, they're not as long as the other front panel headers in some motherboards, because the speaker is built in, so it will always beep even if you don't plug in an extra a microphone. And also here at the bottom, you also don't see this in other motherboards. You have the extra power in here at the bottom, similar to the top. These are for powering, of course, the PCIe X16 slots. Now, if you are running a single card, it doesn't need that power. But if you're running multiple cards, you have to plug in. You have to plug in at least one. It doesn't matter which one, but you have to plug in at least one for powering. And of course, for the bottom, especially if you're a hardcore overclocker, it provides better power stability. And as I mentioned, I will discuss the layout of the PCIe X16s. If you're familiar with the Z77 chipset, of course, it only allows for 16 PCIe 3.0 X16 lanes from the CPU. So how do we have 5 PCIe X16 slots here? And as you can see, they're all mechanical PCIe X16 slots. Now, what they did, as I mentioned, you have a PLX PEX8747 chipset underneath this heatsink as well, shared with the cooling is shared with the Z77 chipset, and that PLX PEX8747 chip has actually allowed up to 48 lanes of PCIe X 3.0. Now, they don't use NF200 anymore because NF200 from NVIDIA only supports up to PCIe Gen 2, PCIe 2.0. So now for PCIe Gen 3, they have that PLX PEX8747 chip. And of course, the topmost is not connected to that. It's actually connected directly to the CPU. So that will provide 16x from the CPU directly if that is the only card plugged in. But if that's not the only card plugged in, it will be running at 8x in 2-way, 3-way, and 4-way SLI. And these other ones, the second one, it's all connected to PLX, and this one is always 16x no matter what. This is 8x and 8x from the PEX8747 chip, and the third one is an 8x no matter what. So this is always 16x, and this is always 8x. And of course, you're only going to use the third one as if you really want to populate it. So if you want double SLI, you want to run in the top or the second, or the second and this. Or the second and the fourth one. And the fourth one right here is 16x, also 8x, 8x from PLX, and it runs 16 on a 3-way configuration with paired with the top one. They're running at 16, 16, and 8. If you're running a 3-way that way, but if you're running it in a 4-way configuration with the 8x, 16x, there's always 16x. This one will be 8x in a 4-way, and this is the 8th. This is the 5th slot will be the 8x in a 4-way SLI. And of course, this one is also from the PLX. So only the first one is directly connected to the Intel chipset, while the rest is on the PLX chipset. And of course, we shouldn't miss the PCIe X1 slot here for your sound cards or other devices that run in the PCIe Express X1 slot, and it's powered by the PCH. Of course, it's not using any of the PLX chips in there. And forget, there's also one panel here. This is the front panel audio. See, located here behind one of the PCIe Express lanes. And move it here. We can take a look at some of the features here at the back. Now, here you have a 7.1 audio with the optical audio connector right there, and this one is actually a Mini-DisplayPort for displaying video from the Intel processor. Now, of course, it appears like it looks like a. I'm trying to think. This looks like a female USB 2.0. I think a Mini Type A, but make sure that it is not used as a connectivity. It only is used as a display video for outputting video display. So if you don't have a mini display, you need a Mini-DisplayPort adapter. If you only have an HDMI or a DVI port, they usually run around $30. But I'm actually surprised they didn't include it in the accessory package. But if you really need that, you can grab it from stores ranging from $35, I believe, is the lowest price I've seen, and all the way to the active adapters up to $100 if you need that. And here we have, of course, the audio. I forgot to mention is ALC889. You can see the chip right here, Realtek. Decent codec here, and you have your 4 USB 3.0 ports, and these are powered from the Intel chipset. and of course now natively supported in the Z77 chipset. And you have a pair of gigabit LAN here, and if you look closely, these are running from a pair of Marvell chipsets. You have the Marvell AT57, I believe. It's a pair of them, like gigabit LAN ports. And here you have another Marvell RAN chipset. These are E-SATA ports running the Marvell 6121, I believe, A8SE 6121 E-SATA ports at the bottom. And you have your SATA USB 2.0 ports from the Z77 chipset. You have 2, 4, 6, and 2 more at the bottom for a total of 10. And of course, for legacy users using a PS2 keyboard like me, you have a IBM Model M keyboard. A wonderful keyboard, but very few motherboards support a PS2 connector now, so it's nice that EVGA has included that connector right there. And similarly to the front, you have your CMOS reset button in here from the back, so even if it's inside your case, you can reset that CMOS or clear it. And pretty much covers it. Let's see if I've missed any features in here. But of course, the next thing we do is we're going to put it inside our system and put in our i7-3770K processor and see how well this motherboard performs. And we now have a new testing methodology here in High-Tech Legion. We actually test a lot more of the features now. We're going to test the connectivity, the storage, when we're going to minimize the amount of gaming benchmarks and other benchmarks that doesn't really matter, especially if you're not comparing multiple motherboards at the same time. So subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/hightechlegion to see more videos like this and to get daily updates on our video reviews. And also you can check the rest of the review at the link below at hightechlegion.com. And you can also leave a message below, questions or comments. Visit us anytime at our website, or just leave a comment below. We'll try to answer it as best we can. And again, see you next time. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.